Hello everybody and welcome back to another Marvel Crisis Protocol character spotlight. And today we are taking a look at a character who really recently had one of the movies of all time released for him, and that is going to be Kraven. So yeah, we're going to go ahead and jump right in. So Kraven is coming in here with a 3-3-3 defensive line. He's got 5 stamina and is a 3 threat. So that's like the most baseline kind of 3 threat stat line that you could possibly have. He's a size 2 and a medium mover. So again, keeping with that, just very, very baseline so far. He's got a small base. So yeah, this is kind of everything is just about average here so far. But where he starts to really get interesting is when we look into his attacks here. So he has 2 attacks, and they're both 0 cost attacks. The first one is his Kukri Strike. This is a range 2 5 dice attack. It says after the attack's result, he's going to gain 1 power. So cool, your basic gainer. He's always going to gain 1 for this. He's also going to hand out the bleed condition automatically. So that's also really, really nice, just being able to kind of, no triggers or anything like that. There's going to be an extra damage, or you're going to have to shake it at some point, so that's always nice. And then he's got the Wild Elusive here. After the attack is resolved, he may advance small any direction too, so you can use this to kind of retreat to safety or to go engage another target or something like that. So yeah, pretty versatile trigger, especially once you start looking at his second attack here, the Spear Thrust attack. And I love when they do things like this with attacks. So this is another 0 cost attack. It's a range 3 4 dice physical, so a little bit weaker, but a little bit further range than his first attack there. And this one is a builder, so usually it goes the opposite way. The lower dice attack is the gainer, and the higher dice attack is the builder. He mixes things up a little bit. He's going to gain power based on the damage dealt with this attack instead of just gaining 1. But he is only throwing 4 dice. However, if he has already attacked the target character during its activation this turn with a Kukri Strike, he adds 3 dice to this attack roll. So that suddenly is a 7 dice attack that's building him power from range 3. And that's really nice too, because you can use that elusive to kind of get out of their range 2 for any, hit backs on their turn. But you get to then make your 7 dicer at range 3, which is really, really nice. In addition to that, if you did get your Wild Elusive, or maybe you just walked into range 3, if you have advanced or been placed during your activation this turn, after the attack is resolved, you may advance medium. So again, you really get to play that kind of hit and run game if you really want with Kraven. You can walk in, poke someone at range 3, and then walk out. So yeah, really, really cool attack, very similar to what we see on Gwen and Gwenum. So I absolutely love those types of attack profiles. Really, really interesting. But that is going to do it for his attacks. He doesn't have a kind of traditional spender there. He can fairly consistently throw a 7 dicer most turns as long as he has a range 2 target. But otherwise, he doesn't have any actual paid for attacks. Going into his superpowers, though, he starts out with Corner the Beast, a pretty unique superpower, and I think it's really, really neat. It's a 2 cost active superpower where you're going to choose an enemy character within range 3 of this character. Until the end of its next activation, each time the chosen character advances or climbs, it's going to suffer 1 damage. If the chosen character has the Wall Crawler superpower, it loses the Wall Crawler superpower until the end of its next activation. This is a really cool superpower. In terms of how strong it actually is, it depends on the situation. I think in some cases it can be really, really good. Ironically, against himself, it's pretty good because he's got advances off of both of his attacks here that he's going to have to choose not to use if he doesn't want to take damage. So against himself or Gwen or some similar models, really, really useful. And, getting rid of Wall Crawler is also really, really nice in the right situation. Obviously, if you're against Web Warriors, this is going to be a little bit more meaningful there. But they can get around it with places and things like that for moving instead of actually taking advances. So something to keep in mind there as well. But yeah, in general, it's a really, really cool superpower. Next up, we have the Expert Tracker superpower. This is a 3 cost active superpower that says choose an enemy character. Allied characters roll 1 additional attack die when targeting the chosen character with attacks this round. And this one is also just a really, really solid superpower. We have seen this before. This is also on Lockjaw. I don't actually know which one came first, so one of them has copied the other. But it's a really solid superpower. Being able to say the rest of your team has an extra die against this model in particular is really, really good. For himself, it makes him actually hit quite hard, especially if he can do the Kukri Strike into Spear Thrust, being a 6 dice now on that basic gainer there. followed up by an 8 dice Kukri Strike, so, or Spear Thrust rather. So yeah, makes him hit relatively hard on his own turn as well for a 3 threat, and for only 3 power and with nothing really else to spend his power on other than these 2 superpowers, he can do it pretty often, which feels pretty good. So yeah, really, really solid superpower here. In addition, another thing worth mentioning with this is that he is a part of Spider Foes, which obviously we'll be talking more about affiliations later, but one thing that really works for him in Spider Foes is the Surprise Webhead Tactics card, or as my local group likes to call it, Siege U in particular. And basically, the idea is all of your Spider Foes characters get to make an attack targeting the same model. So it's really, really good for something like that. You throw Expert Tracker on them, you get an extra die on that model, and then everyone on your team gets to pile in on that model. You know, that's going to add up really, really quickly. In addition, that card in general is just really good with him because it lets him use Spear Thrust twice in a turn. So he can, you know, make a Kukri Strike attack or maybe even just walk in and then Spear Thrust something and then get to do it again with the Surprise Webhead card. So yeah, really, really solid for that too. And the last rule on his card here is a passive superpower, the Elixir of Calypso. This character may reroll 1 die in its attack or defense rolls. And yeah, pretty straightforward, but really, really good for him. I mean, the 3/3/3 defensive line is definitely on the squishier side without it, so definitely helps him stay alive a little bit more. And the reroll on attack is just really good, especially if you're getting that extra die from Expert Tracker. So yeah, this is just good. Flipping the character over here, nothing changes. He's the same. He just gets some different art there, and he looks way too happy on this side. I don't know. I don't know what he's smiling about, but yeah, that is a face for Kraven. But yeah, otherwise nothing really changes. Scrolling down a little bit, we see that he does actually have a couple of tactics cards here. The first one is probably one of my favorite tactics cards in the game, just on kind of fluff and thematics, and that is Fearful Symmetry. This is an unaffiliated reactive card that has a wall of text here, but basically, when Kraven the Hunter KOs an enemy Peter Parker, if there is no Peter Parker in your squad, Kraven the Hunter may play this card. Kraven the Hunter transforms into Spider-Man Peter Parker. Replace Kraven the Hunter's stat card with Spider-Man Peter Parker's stat card with its healthy side up. Move all damage tokens, power, special conditions, objectives, and effects from Kraven to Spider-Man. Spider-Man is now part of your squad. So yeah, he turns himself into 4th threat Spider-Man, and this is if he kills any of the Peter Parkers. It doesn't have to be specifically the 4th threat version, but that is the only one he can transform into because that is the only one named Spider-Man with the alias Peter Parker. But he can kill Amazing Spider-Man, Spectacular Spider-Man, or of course 4th threat Spider-Man. Not that too many people are running 4th threat Spider-Man, but you know, in theory he could do that. And this card is just fun. Is it all that good, considering the fact that 4th threat Spider-Man is generally considered not? Probably not. But it's really, really cool, and I've actually had this almost pull out a game for me of just kind of, it just happened to come up. I think it was a Amazing Spider-Man he ended up getting the killing blow on, and being able to go up to that long move with 4th threat Spider-Man almost pulled things back. It didn't, so unfortunately it's not as much of a success story as I want it to be, but still it was a kind of a cool moment, and getting to pull this card off is just kind of one of those really cool things where it's like, you know, if you're playing this character often, you want to do it at least once because it's just kind of fun. But as far as competitive viability and things like that, maybe not so much. Still, really, really cool card. Next up, we have Founding Members, and this is a newer card that he is able to play. It's played during the power phase, and you can only play it in the Spider Foes affiliation. An allied Spider Foes character may play this card. During this round, each time an enemy character suffers damage from an allied effect, choose up to one of the listed allied characters that is within range 2 of the enemy character. The enemy character gains the special condition shown corresponding to the chosen allied character. Doing great at reading today. And for Kraven, that is Poison, which is honestly probably the worst condition on this list in most situations, so that's a little bit of a shame. But still, it's kind of cool, and I mean, he can benefit from the other characters' effects, so that's also kind of cool. And with his ability to, you know, potentially make everyone's attacks better and do things that are interesting with that, being able to do that can be really, really interesting with some of the characters on here. So there's some cool synergy, but probably not the best overall specifically for Kraven. Taking a look at affiliations here, he's a member of two affiliations. The first one is Criminal Syndicate, and Crimson is an interesting one for him. Certain things out with their original leadership, Kingpin. Unfortunately, I don't think he's all that great for Kingpin's leadership, mainly because Kingpin really cares about his models staying on their healthy side, and he's a little bit on the squishier side, so not too great for that sort of thing. But still, it's never a bad leadership. I mean, Kingpin's leadership is just really good, so, you know, he can still have play there, I'm sure. It's just probably not his favorite home. For what it's worth, it's not much of a leadership, but Claw's leadership technically works pretty well with him for the same reason of being a squishier model. When he gets dazed or KO'd, Claw gets to move, so I guess that's a thing. The next one is MODOK, and MODOK's is kind of interesting for him, having the defensive reroll and you know, being able to throw so many dice on his attacks. He will get to use the leadership pretty often, but it doesn't really help him with any like triggers or anything. It's just kind of good for consistency. So I mean, it's not bad with him, but it's probably nothing particularly crazy either. It's all right. One thing that is kind of interesting with him is that because he doesn't have that many things to spend his power on, if he's doing all right for power, he can kind of be a good funnel for All in This World or Beneath Me, which is nice. So, I mean, yeah, he can serve as a bit of a battery for that. The last one is Shadowland Daredevil, and in my opinion, this is probably the best Criminal Syndicate leadership for him. Whenever an allied character attacks an enemy character holding or contesting an objective, it may reroll one of its attack dice, and you can use it to reroll skull results. This is just really solid for him, and if he already has a good roll, but all the things he can, you know, all the things that aren't succeeding are skull results, you can kind of use this to unlock one of those skulls and then still use his own reroll if that reroll failed. So kind of works in an interesting way for that. Not the biggest like thing ever, but yeah, this is probably just like the most generically good for him. He does like to be attacking twice in a turn if he can, so yeah, it's not bad. As far as general synergies in the affiliation go, I mean, being able to give anyone an extra die on their attack dice is just turns out really good. So, I mean, that's useful for pretty much everyone. In terms of who can kind of benefit from that more, I'd say models like Killmonger can potentially get a lot of value out of that, just kind of being able to use it to kind of set up a really good usurp turn. So that's worth kind of acknowledging. And then just, you know, characters with rapid fire will get a lot of value out of that. So something like Hood could be really interesting. Bullseye Spender even could be really neat with that. So there's a few things like that. Mysterio quite appreciates it because he has to do, I think he has to do damage for his attack trigger, so being able to get an extra die on that is really nice for him as well. But yeah, it turns out being able to give extra dice is just kind of good. The other affiliation he's a member of is the Spider Foes. Surprise on this one, where he's got access to two leaderships here, the Doc Ock leadership and the Green Goblin leadership. We'll start things out looking at Doc Ock's here, just alphabetically. And yeah, this one's reasonable for him. I mean, he doesn't really need the power much. In the early game, it can be nice to help him get going, but by the time you kind of get to the mid-late game thing, he just doesn't have that much he wants to frequently be spending power on, and he's reasonably okay at building it himself, so he doesn't care too much about that part, but being able to remove these conditions is really nice for him. All three of these conditions are really bad for him, so being able to remove those is certainly a good thing. But yeah, otherwise, I mean, when your wilds count as two, having extra dice is also really good, so I guess there's that as well. But I mean, I could say that for pretty much any character on this list. Yeah, not a bad leadership for him, probably not his favorite thing in the world. Goblins is in a kind of similar boat. I mean, it's certainly a little bit more generic when you're attacking. You get to reroll one of your opponent's defense dice, and yeah, it turns out that is just a pretty solid ability to have, and Kraven will be able to get some mileage out of that. He likes to attack twice in his turn if he can, 3 times with the card that Foes kind of gives you to do that, and yeah, that works pretty well with Goblins. So yeah, obviously here I think his biggest synergy in the Spider Foes affiliation is going to be their tactics card. Surprise Webhead is just really good for him, but otherwise I don't know if there's too much in terms of specific synergies, just kind of, you know, who doesn't appreciate that extra die. As far as other affiliations that you could splash him into, honestly, this one I had to spend some time thinking about who where I think he would be a ideal splash, and the kind of best one that I came up with, where personally I would be really interested in splashing him, is Midnight Suns. And I think that's because they kind of have a little bit in common with foes, but also because they have some things that really, really benefit him, specifically Blade's leadership, where you can basically place yourself within range one of your current position for one power. Usually the power isn't a problem for Kraven, so that's fine, but it also allows him to guarantee get that extra movement off of his spear thrust attack, because it does specify if he's moved or been placed. So you can use the blade leadership to place yourself within range one. That can also just help you get into that range two bubble for your 5 dice attack to start things out. And then once you go on to the spear thrust attack, which at that point is 7 dice now, you also get the medium advance because you've also placed yourself. So yeah, really, really cool with that. He also has the automatic bleed on the 5 dicer, which is just kind of a mild little extra synergy with Blade. Not really the reason you'd be bringing him here, but just kind of one extra little thing to add on to it. In addition, the affiliation does have access to Siege of Darkness, which is kind of similar to the Foes Guard, lets everyone make an attack. So if you're kind of consolidating into one target anyways, you could actually play that card on Kraven's turn, even though he doesn't get to make an attack with it because he's not a member of the Midnight Suns, but he can give that extra die to everyone on the team. So yeah, really, really nice for, again, just really needing to take down one model. Your opponent's got a Hulk or something like that. Being able to say, hey, we have an extra die on that model, and then like 4 of our models are going to make an attack in it, can be really good. So yeah, he's probably pretty decent here, although I haven't tried it out myself. I'm also going to give another mention to another place that I kind of just thought of where I think he would at least be interesting, although I'm not sure how good, and that would be in a Sam Vengers list. And the reason why I think he could be interesting here is, well, first of all, Sam likes to run kind of wide. The, meta version of Sam for the longest time was referred to as the Sam Spam list, and it's still very much a thing. Where the idea is basically you bring a lot of characters, they're all, relatively more annoying to take down, and while I don't put Kraven in that category, he is low threat enough that you can definitely squeeze him in with a lot of other characters, and I think when you're running that many characters on the board, being able to kind of say, this model we're all going to get an extra die against can be really, really nice, because you're going to hopefully get a lot of mileage out of that throughout the round. So yeah, I think it's interesting for something like that, or really any list where you're kind of trying to go super wide and still be somewhat attrition-y. Could be really, really interesting for him. So yeah, is it the best thing in the world? But I think it's at least really, really interesting, and you can combine it with reserve members, and I think that's an extra die, or maybe it's a reroll. I'm pretty sure it's an extra die though on an attack once per round, which is pretty cool. So obviously you got to be near leaders for that, but Avengers has no shortage of those. And just because I wanted to double check, it is an extra die, so yeah, it's pretty good for that. And the extra die in defense can actually help make up for that lack of bulk a lot more. So that actually sounds really interesting, and I might try something like that out soon in the near future. But that's kind of it for like the main synergies that I think he has with affiliations. He's got some neat ones with some specific models. Like really anyone with a rapid fire attack really, really appreciates that extra die. So, if you're running a lot of rapid fire models, he's definitely a worth considering splash. But outside of that, I don't think he's really looking for specific things, because there are very few leaderships in the game that really increase durability, and I think that's kind of the one thing that he's missing on his own. So yeah, I mean, he's pretty self-sufficient, and not very many of the leaderships can help him with the things that he is lacking. So, in theory, any of the more defensive ones could be all right for him. Something like Web Warriors, where he does have the mobility to kind of run around with them as well. Could be kind of interesting. Something like Invader's Shield, same deal. You can kind of use that extra defensive dice, and, they've certainly got plenty of guns to take advantage of the extra die. So there are definitely some interesting places, but nothing super specific jumping out at me. So yeah, kind of in summary here, Kraven is a really, really interesting piece. He's got a really cool attack profile here, and is capable of outputting pretty good damage on his own with Expert Tracker, giving him some extra dice, and then allowing him to make 5 and 8 dice attacks as a 3 threat, which is pretty solid. I mean, or sorry, 6 and 8 dice attacks as a 3 threat. Which is, a little above the curve, I would say, for the average 3 threat for output, especially since he's got a reroll on top of that. So, Yeah, he hits pretty well. He has got some cool mobility tricks too. Being able to kind of advance off of both of his attacks in theory is really, really interesting. And yeah, just in general, he's got a really, really cool and unique kit. His biggest drawbacks kind of come from the fact that he doesn't have any form of control on his kit. He has no way of pushing or throwing enemy characters, and he's kind of squishy. I mean, 3 dice with a single reroll really isn't going to get him super, super far, and he's only 5 stamina on both sides of his card, so the big things you can kind of do for him in terms of bringing him with other models is either bring models that really, really leverage Expert Tracker and just kind of get as much value out of the attrition side as possible, or bring some stuff to kind of increase his survivability. Bring him with bodyguards, bring him with characters that can give him extra dice or extra rerolls or things like those. Can really help him kind of stay in the game longer and get some more value out of things like that Expert Tracker. So he's a pretty versatile piece. He can kind of play in a lot of different ways. He definitely, has things that he likes to have from his teammates. The Midnight Sun's bump is really, really cool for him. Being able to attack an extra time in foes is really, really nice. So those are the sorts of things that he kind of appreciates the most, which are unfortunately kind of rare. You don't get too many things like that in the game in general. But yeah, I think if you kind of build around him, he can be a really, really interesting kind of centerpiece. And at only 3 threat, he's relatively easy to kind of experiment around with. And if he ends up going down or something because he is on the squishier side, it's not too big of a deal. He's only a 3 threat, so you're kind of still in the game. But yeah, at the end of the day, he's a really, really cool character. And I mean, sometimes you just want to be able to throw down a model and be like, hey, it's Kraven time, and throw out a 6 followed by an 8 dicer. And, if you're in foes, maybe another 8 dicer, which can be really, really brutal. So, yeah, definitely some kind of cool things you can do with that. But that is going to do it for our discussion on Kraven here. Let me know down below if I missed anything. Are there any combos, synergies, or anything like that that you guys know of with Kraven that I missed here? Very, very curious to hear what you guys think, because I do think he has a really, really cool kit, and when you can kind of exploit the neat things specifically on his second attack here with other models and things like that, it becomes really, really interesting and really, really fun. So definitely let me know if I missed anything like that. Always curious to hear what you guys think. But that's going to do it for my portion of this character spotlight, so I hope you guys have enjoyed. If you did, please do drop a like down below. Subscribe if you're new to the channel. We do discussion-focused content like this every week, and we got battle reports on the weekends, so if you're a fan of any of that sort of thing, feel free to jump on in. But that's going to do it for now, so until next time, have a great day, everybody. Peace.